Welcome again, everyone. Today is March 17th. It's St. Patrick's Day. We had a long talk prior, and we're going to title this one, Happy St. Patrick's Day. Do you feel lucky? Jim and Dave, you guys are on?
We're on.
Good. We're going to continue with the same format. David's going to act as moderator, ask questions, and we'll go down the line. Go ahead, David.
Okay. We'll start with, there's actually a couple questions here altogether. There's a lot of geopolitical things going on, which will lead to monetary talk towards the end. So I just want to cover some questions. We'll try and run a couple of them together. There's been a lot of changes this week in the leadership of the country, and I know we talk about this stuff all the time. I would like to know what you guys think about, one, Tillerson getting thrown out and Mike Pompeo being put in as the new head of the State Department after being former head of the CIA. And then we moved a new head of the CIA in who apparently oversaw secret torture programs in her stay overseas, to the point where it's been written that if she was to travel to certain countries in Europe, there would be arrest warrants issued for her. So on the start off, why don't we go with you, Jim? And, what do you think about the shakeup at the top of the power structure of the United States?
I think if you're any part of that cabinet and somebody asks you a question, you should run back, find them, see the boss, ask them what the answer is, and then go tell them. Because if you disagree with him, you're out. And Tillerson disagreed on many subjects and actually acted on his disagreement. So his life expectancy and his position, which he, by the way, was a pretty good selection for, is extremely short. I'm surprised he was there that long. You must agree with Mr. Trump 100%, or you're out. You got carried away with that show. You're fired. That's my take. Now tell me what really happened.
I have some thoughts on Mike Pompeo taking over. Pompeo, as head of the CIA, had a whole year to not dig up, so to speak, but to gather dirt. And now, basically, he's sitting in the White House and is probably going to turn that dirt over as part of my thought process is from June, July, August, the amount of arrests that are going to happen are going to be unbelievable, and I think that's a function of winning the 2018 midterm elections. As far as the woman is concerned, what was her name, David?
Yeah, off the top of my head, it's escaping me, and I don't have her written down, but that's why I just said she's the new head of the CIA. Yeah. She was in charge of an overseas facility, specifically in what country is irrelevant. It's,
Well, I just thought today some senators are demanding that there's a background check of her, black ops, if you want to call it. So I think her confirmation may be quite difficult.
Well, I think going to her confirmation wearing that skin-tight black suit with the whip is a good idea.
Well, the reason I start with that question is because then I would like to just jump to the next as we move this along. Because in 30 minutes, there's a lot of things to cover. If I try and do 10 questions, that only leaves us like 3 minutes a topic. So I'll try and run these together.
David.
Mike, the new head of the State Department, formerly head of the CIA, wants to scrap the Iran deal. Like it or not, when I say like it or not, it was signed by all parties. It was a deal that was written, much like a real estate deal. Everybody looks at it. Their lawyers look at it. They sign it. Everybody upholds their end. A year and a half later, whatever, all of a sudden, well, I don't like that deal. I'm going to rip it up. I'm going to throw it out. I'm going to renege on it. And at the same time, I'm in the other corner of the world trying to cut a deal with a country, North Korea, to give up their nuclear weapons. So when I look at this guy from the CIA being moved to the State Department, I almost want to say to myself, well, the State Department, I thought, was where statesmen went, and those were the guys who tried to not go to war. Mike seems to be in the corner that he wants to go to war really bad against a country, let's use Iran as an example, that really possesses no present danger to the United States. We allegedly have a missile defense system that was put completely around Russia to defend specifically against Iran, who doesn't even have a nuclear bomb program. So the question becomes is why are we so intent on overthrowing Iran? And the question then leads to, is Israel dragging the U.S. and Russia to war in the Middle East? So that's a run-together question. And, Jim, why don't you run with it, because I think you know where we're going.
Well, how would you like to negotiate with a prior head of the CIA? Okay, the organization it's gone rogue. I mean, there was a time when it's in the early days of the CIA that they fulfilled a necessary function for a country. They didn't actually become a second administration themselves. And you're absolutely right. Your State Department's supposed to balance you, even if you want to go to war. And not that they've ever really accomplished much in that direction, but that's what they're supposed to be. So I think on every development I'm thinking about geopolitically recently has been motivated, guided, and probably planned and structured by those who believe we can win a war. And Iran and Russia are not exactly enemies. So if we decide to take on a friend, all of a sudden a friend of the friend will be highly involved. So it's exactly what you said. Do you feel lucky? As in, the movie where the fellow smashes down a 44 Magnum pistol or semi-automatic, and the answer is that we're getting closer and closer and closer to war. And the placement of people in the strategic position to advise and direct, I don't see any Mother Teresa's there. All I see is a horde of demons and a preparation for war. So my feeling about the new positioning is that war will not be a subject that fails to be discussed in terms of absolute victory, and that we all know is probably incorrect. Not only with the fact that what we have doesn't work, but what they have, the Russians, seems to work better than anything we have. So I consider it very dangerous.
Bill, you want to pick up?
Yeah, my observations on this. First off, the Iran deal that Obama signed was ridiculous and should be reneged on. The only problem is if you renege on one deal and then you've got the CIA, the past CIA director, negotiating for future deals, are you really going to believe that it's a deal is a deal? So that morphs into a trust issue, and of course we'll get the 26th coming up where there's going to be the yuan traded for oil. There's going to be less demand for dollars, and the only thing that has held the dollar together in the past has been military force and confidence, and it's obviously what's going on at the top in the administration is not. You can't call it really confidence building. I do want to go back to the previous topic because we did not talk about McCabe being fired prior to his retirement tomorrow. So now he's going to lose part or all. I don't know what it is, but he's going to lose some of his retirement. I think it's very interesting that was in fact done. It does lend credence to there will be something, there will be more information, damaging information coming out about the Department of Justice. And the latest that I heard is that Trey Gowdy is going to be appointed as Attorney General. And if that happens, I think you'll see unsealed indictments all over the place.
Well, Trey Gowdy is rather outstanding, especially amongst the knuckleheads we have and that we watch on these special committees. There was talk of him not running, and I found that to be, that would be a loss. If he received a position where he could be significantly influential, I would consider that a win.
Well, Jim, now you know why he talked about not running.
Right, of course I do. But when I saw that, I said, gee, we got somebody out there who's effective and not whacked. Okay.
Yeah, but he'll be more effective as an attorney general.
Oh, absolutely.
Because then he's got the big stick.
Yeah, and he also strikes me as tough, straight, fair, and honest. And when you put that on any one person, you really are going out on them. But he does strike me as not the kind of guy that will threaten a man's son in order to get a general to lie and confess to something he didn't do.
Referring to Flynn.
Yes.
Yeah. All right, David, go ahead.
Okay, we're going to jump around just a little bit here. We'll get back to geopolitics, but in the new heads, the new heads, old heads, whatever's going on, in the You're Fired this week and Who's on The Apprentice next week, Larry Kudlow. What do you think of Larry Kudlow being appointed as head economic advisor?
It's a joke, isn't it?
Can I start this one?
Oh, sure, go for it.
The guy's a mental midget. I mean,
that takes care of it.
I put in writing, posted somewhere this past week that Jim, you or I would love to debate him publicly anytime in any fashion, because the man just doesn't think right. I mean, he talks about King Dollar. He sounds like Harry Dent. And Kudlow does not even understand that the reason there was is the operative word, such a thing as King Dollar, was because the dollar was backed and convertible by and into gold. So
and then after that there was no alternative.
Right. So I mean, Larry Kudlow is so far off base, and you can already see him changing his tune. He's Mr. Free Trade. And now all of a sudden he kind of likes tariffs, and I mean he's a yes man.
Well, that kind of gives him more longevity in the present cabinet.
Say that again, Jim.
And that creates a longevity in the present cabinet situation.
Oh right, yeah, being a yes man.
Yep.
But that's not presenting.
It's not doing
reality.
Your job. Yeah, it's not doing your job. And doing your job gets you fired. So the Tillerson thing, I mean, that's not exactly a half-wit, all right? Kudlow, that's a half-wit.
Yeah. David, let's hear your opinion on that.
Well, it's funny because I termed Larry Kudlow, and I think I should get credit for coining this, the Baghdad Bob of the Trump administration.
Yep.
Baghdad Bob was the press release individual when we were invading Iraq who was charged with every day getting up there and telling us that Baghdad was not being bombed into smithereens and that any second Iraq was going to turn this around and win the war. Well, it's funny because I look at this and I say Larry Kudlow was a cheerleader. I have a friend who was in banking who actually introduced me to Bill, who worked with Larry. And I don't want to run a guy down, but he had nothing good to say about him. Bill, you summed it up, so I won't say, But, yeah, he's not qualified. But then you get, is there any qualification in this administration? And I'm not knocking Trump. I'm knocking the whole system. Who's running the show? It's like a clown show. Larry Kudlow, chief economic advisor and cheerleader. I mean, what are we going to bring Maria Bartiromo in, too? and again, it's possible. To pull Larry Kudlow out of CNBC, I mean, you might as well bring Kramer into the cabinet.
Right.
That might be an improvement.
What I'm doing here is I'm drawing a bigger picture to where we get to, where this is all going. Because now that we're all in agreement that, Larry, for whatever reason, has gotten this job and we don't think he's qualified for it. The first thing you've got Larry doing, and let's just back up here a minute, in Davos, the Treasury Secretary uttered the words about maybe a weak dollar now, strong dollar later, blah, blah, blah. The whole world was up in arms. We heard European leaders become very upset that a deal had been broken that was struck. So now you've got Larry Kudlow in here saying, we want a strong dollar, and I would sell gold and buy the dollar. I mean, that's Baghdad Bob. Financially.
You there, David?
Yeah, I hope we haven't lost David. I think
Yeah, he's gone. He'll be back.
What he just said, they took him away.
Yeah, what David was getting to is it's almost like, it is like they're trying to rewrite history.
In front of us, for a reason.
In our conversation earlier today, I don't even remember what topic it was about, but there was a question, do you really believe this or not? And I said, well, the newspapers, the television media are all telling us A, so we know A is not correct.
Bill,
that's the beginning of any argument. We thought they finally got you.
Yeah.
We were very concerned.
We figured they found you.
Yeah.
Well, you know what? Now I make
these. Probably getting kneecapped.
I've made this call on,
and the lady would do it.
That was on a landline. And again, I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but I don't believe in coincidence.
No, you're a conspiracy factor, David.
Wow. So the point I was making, where I was at, is we have Larry Kudlow in here now telling us about the dollar and gold. There's nothing more bizarre in the world because we're sitting here telling people the 100% opposite. You have an unbacked currency. They printed trillions and trillions and trillions and trillions in the last 7-8 years. Gold should be at a minimum of $10,000 or $20,000 an ounce just to balance what we have spent and the deficit we're running. So for Larry to come out and make these claims, that is Baghdad Bob at its best, is it not?
Yeah, it is.
I summed it up as
absolutely.
They're in the process of rewriting history.
Yes, they are rewriting history, which brings us to our next topic, the chemical weapons attack that has allegedly happened in England, and the fact that so far there's been no proof of anything. And you have every Western nation lining up saying they know Putin ordered it personally. He's behind it personally. And as you said, Jim, before the conversation, unless somebody has a phone call they're going to produce where Putin called the spies and said kill the other spies, that can't even be known. And that's before the fact that if anybody does any research at all, the nerve agent that was allegedly used in this attack, if it ever was created, and there is no proof that this specific agent was ever created, but it was worked on in a laboratory in Uzbekistan. And when the Soviet Union broke up, the Americans took over that laboratory in 1999, and we cleaned it up. So if anybody possessed it, we could easily have possessed it. England could easily have possessed it, and that's if it even exists. There has been no independent verification by any organization that there was even a nerve agent used, let alone what the nerve agent was, and that Putin personally ordered it. But you have the whole Western media running with the story, and right now if you ask anybody on the street, what's going on? Oh, Putin's killing people. I just had friends here said the same thing. Oh, yeah, I don't know what he's up to. He's taking back Crimea, and it looks like he's going to take back Ukraine. And, and the average person, and these are very bright people, they were bankers, actually have no clue what is going on. It's like George Orwell's 1984. The public is completely confused as to how this is playing out. So, again, we'll start with you, Jim. What are your thoughts on this? Are we rewriting history?
Well, first, a double agent has a very short lifespan, okay, because everybody wants them. Two, it's almost amateurish to take out a spy in the public, in a park or somewhere else, especially if it makes them foam at the mouth. I don't think Russia did it. If I had to pick anybody who did it, I tend to think we did it with the Brits because of his double agent characteristic. What does that mean? Maybe he knew too much about being the second agent. So their elimination, both the daughter and the son, and the daughter and father, was necessary to keep certain information from being released. But because everybody agrees Putin did it, and Putin seems to be the phone guy now, it's more of, well, let's go to war with the bad guy. So there's a lot of strategies unfolding, and a lot of things in the world are unfolding that aren't by accident. And as far as Putin ordering it specifically, a godfather doesn't order a specific execution. He says to his second, take really good care of him, not just take good care of him. So the whole thesis that Putin ordered this specifically is simply hollow. Okay, why it really happened is he knew something that somebody didn't want him talking about, and therefore it isn't payback. It's in present time. It's
silence.
He got silenced, but it's the idea that he's got a payback rather than a spy cut it out.
And Jim, this was the topic that we were talking about earlier, where I said the print media, television media, they're all saying Putin did it, which tells me for a fact that he didn't, because whenever the media lines up like they have on something like this, it's wrong.
How often can you make Putin mad? How often can you bait him? Okay, you can't. And when he says to Great Britain that it's extraordinarily dangerous and out of line to accuse a nuclear power of some event in your own country, he's mad as hell.
Well, his speech 2.5 or so weeks back, it was really telling. Within that speech, he basically said there can't be a world if there's no Russia. There can't be a world for Russians if there's no Russia. So, dig into that. Read.
Yeah. How about Doomsday Machine?
Speech. And what he's saying is, there's not going to be a world if there's not a Russia.
Yeah, that's called the Doomsday Machine. And, as much as that is, I'm sure we got one too. If you lose the war, smoke the world. Okay? Kind of an interesting tactic.
And guys, with this spy that was poisoned in London, my immediate thought was you would not have even found his body. He would have just gone missing if it was ordered by Putin.
He would have done it right. Okay? He wouldn't have allowed anybody to end up in a hospital, even in intensive care. So there was something. Are they going to leave a body
that they can autopsy? It's not like the guy's a Supreme Court justice. There's
no, he's gone. Yeah. 10 minutes later, they fried him. Okay. It's like, yeah, that's exactly what it's like.
Go ahead, David.
Well, we're in agreement. It's a complete setup. It's rewriting the history books. So, you're coming into a situation, and again, this is going to get to kicking the chess table over. The United States is sitting here at present as a population, because I'd like to differentiate, because it's not like I'm un-American, pro-Russian. There's things happening, and the public runs around and doesn't pay attention to what's really going on. And let's use as an example, we just came up on a 50th anniversary of one of the largest war crimes that we know about. It was the massacre in Vietnam, where we just, it was a mess. Without getting into it, we're sitting here there's not one press coverage that I saw in mainstream media about the 50th anniversary, but I've seen the papers covered with a spy and his daughter were poisoned, and we still don't even know how sick they are. We don't even know that they're sick. There's no scientific evidence of anything. So what we get down to is who's writing the history books, and we get back to this is George Orwell. This truly is George Orwell, because once we're erased from history, when I say we're, meaning the conversation we're having, this will go down the rabbit hole. No, 3 years from now, no one's going to remember or care that this conversation took place if what we think is taking place is taking place. We'll be erased from the history books. The history books will read Russia,
they want us to read.
Exactly right. Exactly right. And as we move down this, as an example of that, let's jump back into the financial arena real quick, because this is the points I'm trying to make. I asked the question, and I'll ask both you guys because you're the experts on this. According to the Bloomberg story on Tuesday, the Japanese bond auction, not one bond traded hands all day long. So how much is it worth?
Whatever they say it is. I'm saying that tongue-in-cheek. There is no Japanese bond market. It's a farce.
Yeah. It's not one bond traded, and that is legitimate.
That's never happened before, Jim. I read the story.
Okay. Then there is no market. Then there is a contract, and on that day, it was a contract that you could do nothing with. What is a contract worth that can't function? Nothing. So that on that day, valued all of those bond issues at nothing. And that is one hell of a statement about the financial capacity of the country.
That's if I'm not mistaken, that's the second largest market on the planet.
Well, it can't make you feel good if you're keeping in reserves a very significant amount of U.S. paper.
Well, these were Japanese bonds, Jim, not U.S. bonds.
I know, but any paper. All markets affect each market.
Right.
The bond market is global, and it is singular. And if any part of that market fails to function representing a major country, exactly the same as if there was no market, what does it say for paper? It's used to bonds. What does it say for paper, the asset value of paper? I mean, you want to talk about some precursor in history, that's a good one. So my feeling is if you can't read that sign, you are blind. And don't forget, this is happening at the instant moment that the bond markets, our 3 years, is starting to look as if rates are headed significantly higher. And that's a very important part of this week. So it's not a conditional loan. It almost is a warning sign. It could be considered an alarm. It's not to be discounted as a phenomenon. It's not to be looked at locally. We are changing the structure of interest rates today. Well, we know it's already changed because of 35, 37-year bull market, cracks. It tends to have a little bit of a message in it. And so rates are rising. Paper exchanges, derivatives are all in trouble because all of them have a interest rate criteria. Okay? So we're approaching an economic and geopolitical crisis simultaneously. And history has written that the way, if any history is true, and that's the question, but the history we know of, that we've lived through or I've lived through, says that if you're really going to have a significant economic unwinding, you better have a war to offset the effect of it, to create false and useless demand.
Well, all history has proven that. All history shows that as economic powers fail, they start wars.
Well, you've had the bond market yell, it's over. Okay, whether technical analysis really means anything anymore, that's a debate in itself. But if you do say that markets have voices, then the voice of the interest rate market is, I am going higher, and that so clouds all of the strategy that got us to this point, but also kept things going. Maybe there's no more room to kick that can. We may have come to the end of it, but if the can kicking is ever over, it will be made over, not by the stock market, not by the gold market, but by the bond market. And I say that if you put that together with the chart of the 3-year, you got to say this has been some week, and then take a look at that enormous cup and handle over multi-years that exists in silver.
Right.
And if you really did believe technical analysis was valid, your eyeballs would pop out. I mean, it's the most classical cup and handle I've ever seen, and it's
over 30 some odd years.
Yeah, and it's silver.
Yeah.
Okay, that's wild. So we're watching the bond market do a wild thing. Okay, we're watching the silver market set up, looking like they just found out that silver cures cancer. Okay. We have to be alert that maybe, looking back, this week will have been a most critical week in the development geopolitically and the development economically. They can't be denied, and nobody gives a damn.
David.
Well, okay, just while we stay on the Japanese bond market one more second, and then we'll quickly move on. If the article's correct, again, this year in the fiscal year, Japan purchased 75% of all their own bonds. Well, that would lead you to believe what sucker would buy the other 25%. And it would probably be another country who is partaking in the same game. And since the dollar and the yen is so strongly correlated, to think that it might be happening through banks in the USA or through the Cayman Islands or wherever wouldn't be a stretch, would it?
No, not at all.
Okay, so then let's move to the U.S. bond market. We're talking about Japan's bond market really isn't trading. You can't tell what the value is because there is no real buy and sell. Well, in the United States, we supposedly have never had a failed bond auction. And is that because the world has always wanted to buy our bonds, or is that because we have banks that step in at critical times and make sure that we never have a failed bond auction?
Number two, and they use beards all over the world. A beard is defined as somebody else so as not to be identified.
The Federal Reserve lends the money to the bank, and the bank buys the bonds.
Very simple equation, and all over the world, not just in New York and Chicago, San Francisco. Some of the bond purchases that we've seen in difficult times have come from areas that are totally, you just can't believe it. Okay, it's bigger than the country's production. Where did they get the money to buy those bonds? One place.
Belgium.
The Fed.
Cayman Islands.
That's what I mean. The Fed. Well, everybody in Washington's hidden their money in Grand Cayman. That's why the only tax shelter place that's never been hit is Grand Cayman.
Oh, recently a big holder of treasuries now turns up to be Ireland.
I don't want to say anything about that. I'm half Irish. Yeah. Okay? I mean, my mother.
Yeah, it's St. Patrick's Day. Leave that one alone, Jim.
Yeah, it's not a good subject. There'd be a lot of guys who green around my house, and that would be bad.
Go ahead, David.
Well, so basically what we're saying is there is no price discovery, be it in Japan's bond market or our bond market. The two largest, or, let's call it the most important countries economically in the whole Western sphere. Am I correct? I mean,
in the most important market on the planet in terms of the economic direction.
So what we're saying is there is absolutely no true price discovery because the two biggest paper markets on the planet, because all these bonds are, it's a piece of paper that says, I could write one right now to you. Hey, Jim, I owe you in the future. Yeah. Here. Yeah, take it. And if you look at my pay history, I've never paid off a bond since the beginning of time.
Right, you've refinanced them all. Hey, guys, there is one market that's the price discovery is horrifying, and that's LIBOR. LIBOR blew out again this week, and that shows tight liquidity all over the world. So keep an eye on LIBOR.
Well, as long as they don't replace it with something else.
Well, whatever they replace it with.
Yeah, whatever the new name is, same thing.
Right. I mean, tight liquidity is tight liquidity.
Brings us to question 12. 10 years post-Bear Stearns, has anything changed? Will it happen again? And this time, what magnitude of degree might we see?
Let me start this one, Jim. I'll flip it to you real quick.
Well,
no, yes, and tenfold.
That's
simple.
It isn't it? The head director, the executive director, was my old partner at Bear Stearns, and he hired 14,000 guys in one day.
Oh, and Larry Kudlow was chief economist of Bear Stearns, I believe.
It fits perfectly. I was at a dinner with Jimmy Kahn and my ex-partner, and it was just the three of us. So I thought I could say something without embarrassing anybody. I said, "Why are you playing with fire? Why are you writing so many over-the-counter derivatives that you know, and I know, and that any idiot knows is going to explode and probably take you bankrupt?" And their answer was that it's 50% of their income. The actual amount, I think, was 95% of their income. And the one thing that Bear Stearns did right was bite the bullet first. That's the only right thing we did. And, it's a sign of the times that nobody gives a damn about the corporate entity that they're with. There is no Bear there. There is no Stearns there. All they care about is getting as much money into their own pockets as fast as they can, any way they can, before the place burns down. And we are in the beginning of a fire. There is gasoline being poured around all of our buildings. We have war hawks gathering. We have a president who I believe in a great deal of what he says and wants to see happening, but you got to really recognize he's kind of like a cannon with no ropes on a tossing sea. Okay? He's not Putin. Maybe Putin is the smartest guy out there now. And the only reason we're not at war is the bait we've thrown at Putin he hasn't taken. But as I say, he was mad as hell last week. I mean, he really was angry at being blamed for everything, including these two spies foaming at the mouth. Why must Russia be the bad guy in everything? And why are we, Britain and the United States, the angels of this planet? So there's a little wrong with that. I think we're all bad. Okay, nobody thinks that we're being disloyal to our country. I think they all think. I don't think it's legit. I think Truman's statement was the best. If you come out of government wealthy, you are a crook. Okay? Simple. Where'd they get the money? How'd they get the money? How many people died to get them that money? We are all bad. And maybe you can't continue that forever. Maybe Mother Nature really is angry because we're not, for what we're doing to the spaceship Earth. I think we're at a very critical time in real history. And I think the developments of this week are so complex, yet so revealing, that anyone who doesn't agree with our premises is probably about to get a terrible surprise. Which is exactly what you just said with your 3 words.
Okay, then I'd like to just wrap this up from here because, again, for years and years and years I've been at this. Bill, I've been at this every minute as long as you have, pretty close, which goes back to probably before some of these listeners were even born, unfortunately. It's been a long, hard road for everybody. So everybody out there listening and reading everybody's stuff is looking for, and I'm not knocking King World News, I'm just making a point. When you open King World News, it reads like the National Enquirer of the gold industry. Everybody's looking for when, how much, where. I said to Jim and Bill before the conversation, the real problem, the point of what we're talking about today is if you win, meaning the dollar falls apart and, gold goes to whatever, 2, 5, 10, 12,000, miners double, triple, quadruple, whatever. You come down to, if we have a war, there's going to be no winners. And what Jim and Bill have always tried to say is if you don't have your position before something like this starts, you aren't going to have any. I don't know how this turns out. I don't claim to have a crystal ball, financially or geopolitically. But what you have to do is plan for the worst and hope for the best if you're a smart individual. You have to assess what our risks are, what the problems are in the world, look at them realistically, and try and take stock of it and say, wow, this could happen, even if it only happened on a 10 or 15% scale of what they're talking about. How high could gold go? Well, it might go to 1550 this year, and then from there it may go to 1800. If you end up in a shooting war,
numbers won't matter. Hey, David,
right.
Numbers will not matter. What matters is whether or not you have it.
Bingo. That's where I'm going. Either it's in your pantry or it's not in your pantry. And you have to keep your pantry full is the best way to put it. Right now, we believe prices are suppressed beyond anything that could be imagined. There's not enough time to go into a couple other questions that I had about are we at peak gold, and if we are at peak gold, where is what's in the ground held and who has possession of that land? But that's where geopolitics and finance is going to hit the road. Hopefully we're here another week to do this again, so we don't have time to go all the way out. But I thought it was interesting that it's
start with that next week.
Yeah,
sure. That's a perfect subject.
And David, a simple question is, how much is a jar of peanut butter and a loaf of bread worth if your pantry's bare?
Whoa, baby. Well, and again, I'm not a doomsdayer, but again, I have to get up every day and assess the risk. I tend to think I'm a fairly street savvy person. I think I could survive on my own. A friend of mine said, I once knew a man named Dave. He could probably survive in a cave. He'll tell you the truth and send you the proof because she's a political science professor. And if I tell her something that I know about something, it's not like I made it up, honey. It's like, here's the proof.
She knows you already dug the information up and connected the dots to come up with it.
Yeah, it's like that, the CIA's behind the heroin trade. That's not a secret. You know what I mean?
It used to be.
Well, it was. And it still in certain circles are. People look at you and go, oh, my God, that's conspiracy theory shit.
99-point-something% of the U.S. population would say you're nuts.
Exactly, man. The CIA smuggling coke. But again, it just shows how naive the average person is, which is the point of our whole conversation today is you're now blaming Russia for everything. I believe that that's a mistake. I'm not looking for a war. I'm not a Putin lover. I'm not a Putin hater. I'm not an American lover, an American hater. I'm a reader of the tea leaves. And the tea leaves right now are saying we live in really crazy times. The people need to start assessing for themselves what's really going on. Stop trying to pick at what moment silver or gold are going to whatever price it may or may not go to. Because one, if it gets really bad, it's not going to matter. And if it only gets a little bit bad, it's really going to matter. So, hopefully each week we could try and connect the dots. Next week, if you'd like to, it would be interesting because where is all the above ground gold and then where is all the below ground gold? And especially silver, because if I'm correct, I don't think the United States sources enough silver, according to Mr. Morgan, to supply our Eagle supply.
I think there's enough for Eagles, but there's certainly not enough for industry.
Right. So, that'll be an interesting next week conversation because, again, for the pressure to have been on precious metals that has been on it for the past umpteen years is obscene. It's 1984 upside-down reality. We're printing trillions of dollars, funding wars we can't fund, making wars up, all to try and protect the king dollar.
And Larry Kudlow's advice is sell your gold and buy dollars.
Bad Dad Bob. Thank you very much.
Well, guys, have a great weekend. Have a happy St. Patrick's Day. Happy St. Patrick's Day to you, Mr. Sinclair.
Yes.
I'll have one half of a happy St. Patrick's Day.
All right, guys. That was fun. Have a great week.
Yeah, it was fun. Thank you very much, guys. I appreciate it.
See you next week. Bye-bye.